One time.
Our buddies at the IRS, they have been auditing marijuana businesses more and more. It seems like that's picked up in the last 6 or so months. What I'm looking to you for is why is this happening, and also how big of a deal is this that these cannabis companies are getting audited with more frequency recently?
You're right, the IRS is being more aggressive. Any business that is handling product is probably going to be subject to an audit. It's not a question of if at this time, it's a question of when.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And handling product, basically plant-touching businesses, right?
Correct.
They grow, they sell, not the ancillary companies that are maybe making packaging.
Although we have heard anecdotal stories of other companies being audited under 280E that actually do not handle product, everything that we have seen is companies who are actually handling product.
Okay, so why are these audits happening though? Is it a 280E thing? Is it something else?
Again, I think it goes back to the politics there. We don't, based on our contacts in Washington, we don't think that Congress really understands what is going on the IRS level right now. What we are doing within our office and through others is trying to help educate Congress of what's going on and hopefully try to change the law. We're trying to educate. We're not even sure that the higher ups in the Department of Treasury really understand what's going on the IRS level.
Oh, sure, okay.
So we are trying to do education to these political bodies and hopefully arrive at some type of resolution sometime soon. It's definitely not going to be in the near future, but maybe the not too distant future.
Well, and tax law is so far beyond my area of expertise or even knowledge. I still pay my brother-in-law to do my personal taxes. But you and I were talking before, and this is part 280E, but there's also another IRS form that comes into the mix, right? Is it Form 8300? Is that
Yes.
part of why these businesses are being audited?
There have been recent audits with regard to the cash part of the industry. Form 8300 comes out of what's called the Bank Secrecy Act. Okay. And those are your money laundering laws where they're trying to keep cash from flowing out of illegal enterprises into legal enterprises. And Form 8300 is something that you must file with the IRS if you have a $10,000 or more cash transaction.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So where it's fallen into the industry is not so much, even though it's a cash industry, it isn't the person coming in and buying an eighth or like that. It is the wholesale transactions among the businesses, because there might be 5, 10, 20 pounds that is transacting between two businesses, and because of the problem of banking, the transaction is in cash.
And so with each of those transactions, Form 8300 needs to be filed.
Yes.
And then with each Form 8300, then that raises suspicions and potential for an audit?
Well, part of the problem has been that the industry as a whole has not been aware of this requirement, what we're seeing.
Oh, sure. Okay.
So what's happened is that there's been a number of cash transactions that have been occurring on the wholesale level, but the Form 8300 hasn't been filed.
Oh, sure.
And so that has, what we're understanding in our contacts with the IRS is that is what's on the audits, is because they know that there's been a number of wholesale transactions, large transactions, but they're not getting the reporting. So we've been working with members of the IRS trying to make sure, one, the industry understands what they're doing, and two, we understand what the IRS wants of the industry.
Wow, and you know, I don't think there's absolute up to the moment data on this, but and we're going to talk about marijuana banking later in the program. But I know that MJ Biz Daily reported in the last couple months that 60% of these businesses still do not have banking. So 60%-ish of cannabis businesses don't have access to the traditional banking. So
That's right.
We are seeing a lot of transactions higher than $10,000. That's fascinating. But continuing along this line, you know, there's the big transactions in cash. There's potential audits. There's this form that these companies are now learning that they need to be filling out every time. What's the worst case scenario here, James? Could these audits lead to federal money laundering charges? You mentioned that that's kind of why that form was created in the first place.
There is always the possibility there. Based upon what we are seeing with at least the IRS officials that we are speaking with, we think the possibility of federal charges coming out of this are minimized. However, we've been recommending to our clients what we call cautious compliance. We're not we're doing the things that we need to do, but we're not overly volunteering.
And what do you mean by that? Overly volunteering, giving too much information? What is that?
Well, the business is in the business trafficking and controlled substance in violation of federal law.
Sure.
So the question becomes, we know right now Department of Justice is not pursuing prosecutions, but that doesn't mean that they can't do it in the future.
Right.
We could have a change of administrations. We could have we have two potential candidates that haven't really come out strongly for or against the industry.
Yeah, it's amazing how they've kind of kept that middle of the road
Yes.
approach, right?
We don't know who they are going to appoint, either one of them, as their Attorney General, and what their policy will be. Will the Cole Memorandum suddenly disappear, and all of a sudden there's a lot of prosecutions? So even right now, with the hands-off attitude, people in the industry have to be watchful that sometime in the future there might be prosecutions, and we must plan for that.
I can promise you, James, that there are multiple people out there listening or watching right now who just had shivers go down their spine with this idea of the Cole memo disappearing, because if they do, of course, that takes away a lot of the protections this industry has operated with for a number of years.
Certainly, but our belief is in the long term, regardless of how these things shape out in the short term. In the long term, the industry will prevail. Right now, we have 25 states where it's legal. It looks like we're going to go 29 states in November. The genie's out of the bottle.
Sure.
The federal government is not going to be able to stop it at this juncture. Now, what is it going to look like in the transitional period from when it goes totally illegal on the federal level remains to be seen. And there's probably going to be some bumps along the way. But in the long term, it is going to be legal and will be regulated.
I agree. I think that's the direction we're going on, and it's clearly a path that's been worn by these 25 medical states as well as the others that have gone even further.